So today I will come with a more different what-if scenario, and actually I had this thought of Louis XIV or Louis the Great, as we can also translate it from the French. And he was actually a very important king during that time in France. So he was also one who reigned for a very long time, if not the longest during those years. So let's say, what if Louis XIV never existed? So there are a few things we need to go into detail, and I'm sure not everyone will agree with it. We know that France during those years, they were trying to centralize a lot. And you had Cardinal Richelieu or also Mr. Mazarin, who were certainly, if not surely, figures who were actually very smart into doing so. But if we take out Louis XIV, who was inspired by these ideas of centralization, you would have actually a very different France. Now, of course, there could also be another king who just does the same as him, more or less, but let's assume that even another king might not even take the same ideas as Louis XIV. So what happens? The first consequence is that probably France will be less centralized and even start to decentralize. Nobility would have more power, and it would be much more difficult for the kings to rule. So in fact, they could even lose power slowly but surely, and even start to look like Japan, where you had warlords. But instead of the warlords, you will have the local aristocrats or the old nobility who reigns in there since a long time, or who are vassals. Now, it could look like similar as with the decline of the Ottonian dynasty, where certain vassals started to grow in power. The same could happen with Louis XIII when he dies, and then leaving a throne with a figurehead who is not as strong as Louis XIV. Of course, Europe would be vastly different, for the reason that the French Revolution would be butterflied. So you would have no French Revolution, no Napoleon, no Commune de Paris, you would have no First World War as we know, and no Second World War as we know. But let's not go so far. We will keep in those times. Now, with France being less centralized and also less important, French culture would also be less popular. It was Louis XIV who actually invested a lot in arts, who spent a lot of money, and he was a huge patron of the dance as well, and the ballet, I think. He supported that, and of course it was highly seen by the nobility around all of Europe and the world, perhaps. And so, because you have no Louis XIV who supports this, French as language would never gain this prestige as it had during those years, leaving a gap that needs to be filled. Now, we could have, for instance, Latin, retaining for some more years importance, or we might see a switch towards German, even Spanish, but I will come later to the Spanish. For the German, the sole reason why I think that German might be important is because of Prussia. Prussia would serve as a model country for other kingdoms, duchies, empires maybe, to imitate. They would see that even such a small state was able to surpass all other neighbors in a militaristic way. The military was really disciplined, and the king, Frederick the Great, was a very smart king who had a lot of studies and a lot of knowledge in philosophy, in history, in arts as well. So he could actually be this figure who would replace Louis XIV or Louis the Great. He would be seen as someone that people should look up to. Monarchs around Europe, around the world, would try to imitate him, of course. And that's why maybe the French would become not so much important, and the German, at least in the militaristic terms, would gain much more fame. What about Spain? Now we know that Spain in those years was in a bad shape because we had, this one king who, let's not go into details, but I guess you know what I mean. And he was a very weak king. He was not very in his mind, let's say. So he also left no heir to the throne of Spain. And originally, you had a fight between the grandchild of Louis XIV, between the Habsburg dynasty and also the dynasty that ruled in Bavaria. And now perhaps Austria would be very interested to just go there and put their monarch in there. But there was also this idea that already existed before Louis XIV, and it was the stability of the European powers. So it was not likely that the European powers would just see Austria and the Habsburg doing their thing. So they would probably support Bavaria in having the throne of Spain. Now, this would mean that Spain would actually be able to fill the gap that the weak French kingdom would leave. However, this would just postpone their decline in one way or another, because they had problems with colonies, the infrastructure, and so on and so forth. But we won't go into these details. Now, for Spain, having actually all the influence around the world, especially with Latin America, we could even suggest that Spanish might actually rival Latin and German in terms of popularity on the courts. So perhaps due to the influence that the Spaniards had in Italy, it might be possible that the Italian kingdoms, duchies, and monarchies would rather pick the Spanish culture than the German one. So they would then start to speak more Spanish, they would start to imitate Spanish customs, and so on and so forth. What about Austria? Now, as we know, Austria had launched reforms way before the French Revolution. They started with fiscal reforms, with legal reforms, with all kinds of reforms that you can imagine. So in their core lands, they had better chances to stay in power and actually also gain in popularity. However, because there's no French Revolution, we would still see the birth of the United States of Belgium. Because it was actually in there where the opposition was really high. And actually the only place that was not opposing the reforms was Luxembourg. For a simple reason, there were not enough people, and also they were too isolated from the rest of the Habsburg Empire to care about a lot of things. So they just did their own stuff, and they were just basically Luxembourg. Now, as for the Hungarians, they were also not quite happy. And we could actually see a faster Ausgleich happening, where you would have the Austrians giving a lot of rights to the Hungarians, because there was simply no coalition war, no Napoleon, nothing like that to take care of. And having actually all of this happening, we could say that, for instance, the Ottomans, they could not take advantage of Austria being weak, because simply the Ottomans had their own troubles. Russia would just care for the Orthodox border regions, perhaps. They were not in the shape of taking too much lands, as they already would probably even so absorb some parts of Poland because of their bad government that they had at those times. And there is a strong possibility that we will see a very dynamic change within the Holy Roman Empire. And Prussia might actually become the dominant German power. With French weakness, Austrian decline, Prussia could challenge the Austrian hegemony and even support the Hungarian rebels, the United States of Belgium, to their advantage. They could take lands which belong more or less to the Austrians, and they could simply annex them or found like puppet kingdoms in there. And without Napoleon, we would not have a Germany based on nationalism, but rather we would have a united Germany maybe based on the past. A Germany based on past means that probably the Prussian king would look up to the Ottonians, the authority that they had in Eastern Francia, and also probably the Roman province of Germania. Now, of course, it's not 100% sure that we could say that Germany will unite, that even that German-speaking part of Austria or Austria-Hungary would be united to them. But there's a strong chance that actually it might happen in one way or another. It was not inevitable, but it was very likely to just happen for that reason. So to sum it up, German and Spanish would have way more influence in terms of culture and language. Spain could postpone their decline. Austria would have much faster troubles, and they would actually also be able to even lose their status of great power. And Germany might become much faster dominant, for the simple reason because there's no concurrence. So I hope you like this video, and if you have some comments about it, just comment about it, and I hope to see you next time on Althistory Luxembourg. Don't forget to subscribe, give a comment, give a like, and watch all the other videos that I have on my channel. Have a great day!